I knew the HOA was lying the moment the first police cruiser rolled over my gravel driveway like it owned the place. The red and blue lights washed across my half-painted porch, bounced off the windows of the empty houses behind me, and turned the whole end of Hawthorne Lane into something that looked like a crime scene. I still had gray primer on my hands, a paintbrush drying stiff on the top step, and the sharp smell of fresh-cut cedar hanging in the morning air from the fence boards I had stacked beside the garage. Then Marjorie Whitcomb stepped out from behind the officers with her white clipboard pressed to her chest like a badge. She pointed one red fingernail at me and said, "That man is refusing HOA authority." I almost laughed, but I had learned a long time ago that silence makes arrogant people talk themselves into trouble. Officer Daniel Reeves looked tired, the kind of tired cops get when they know they have been dragged into rich neighborhood nonsense before their coffee has cooled. His boots crunched over the gravel, slow and careful. "Sir, are you Ethan Caldwell?" he asked. "That's me." Marjorie moved closer before he could say anything else, perfume cutting through the cedar and dust like chemical flowers. Behind her stood 3 members of the Willow Creek HOA board, all dressed for a meeting that nobody invited me to, all wearing the same tight little smiles people wear when they think the law is just a tool they can borrow. "He removed our compliance marker," Marjorie snapped. "He posted an illegal private property sign. He has refused multiple notices. And this morning, he verbally declared that he is not subject to the Willow Creek Homeowners Association." She said that last part like I had confessed to robbing a bank. The officer turned to me. "Did you say that?" I wiped my hands on a rag and looked past him at the sign I had planted beside the driveway an hour earlier. Black letters on white metal. Private property, not HOA controlled. "Yes, sir," I said. "I told her I'm not under your HOA." The board members actually chuckled. One of them shook his head like I was a child who had misunderstood bedtime. Marjorie's smile stretched thin. "Mr. Caldwell bought one distressed house at the end of a governed community and now thinks he can rewrite 40 years of neighborhood standards." That was the first mistake she made in front of witnesses, not the last. The morning wind pushed a loose violation notice across my driveway, the paper scraping over stone until it caught against my boot. I looked down at the bold red stamp across the top. Final enforcement warning. It had my name on it, my address on it, and a threat of legal action printed in all caps. What it did not have was any legal authority. Officer Reeves followed my eyes to the paper, then back to Marjorie. "Ma'am, this is a civil matter unless there's trespassing, vandalism, or a disturbance." "There is trespassing," she said immediately. "He is occupying HOA-controlled property without compliance." That made the air go still. Even the board stopped smiling for half a second. I could hear the low hum of a lawnmower 3 houses away and the little tick of my cooling porch light in the morning sun. Marjorie had just said the quiet part out loud. She did not want me to follow HOA rules. She wanted the police to help her claim my land. I reached into my back pocket and felt the folded county receipt there, worn soft at the edges from the number of times I had checked it. But I did not pull it out yet. Not while her confidence was still growing. Not while Officer Reeves's body camera was pointed right at her. Marjorie lifted her clipboard higher. "He needs to be removed until the board can review his status." I looked at the officers, then at the board, then at the row of old houses stretching behind me, every one of them quiet, empty, and legally mine. They thought I was standing alone in front of a fixer-upper I barely understood. They did not know this house was only the last piece of a block I had spent 18 months buying one deed at a time. The strange part was that Hawthorne Lane had never felt like a battlefield until Marjorie decided to plant flags on it. When I first walked through that old house 8 months earlier, it smelled like dust, pine rot, and the kind of silence that settles after a family has been gone too long. The front porch sagged 2 inches on the left. The gutters were packed with oak leaves. The kitchen floor had a soft spot near the sink that groaned every time I stepped on it. Most people saw a teardown. I saw old bones worth saving. My mother had raised me to believe houses remembered who cared for them, and after she passed, I needed something that could take my grief and give it work to do. So I bought the last neglected house at the dead end of Hawthorne Lane with a tool belt, a bank folder, and a promise to myself that I would make it stand straight again. I was not a lawyer. I was not a politician. I was a 43-year-old contractor who knew how to read blueprints, patch plaster, sister a joist, and spot bad paperwork from 30 feet away. Years of renovation taught me that the most expensive damage is usually hidden behind fresh paint. That rule applied to houses. It applied to people too. On my third day there, while cleaning out the garage, I found a metal filing cabinet buried behind broken shutters and a stack of warped baseboards. The drawers screamed when I pulled them open, metal on metal, loud enough to send a pair of sparrows flying out from the rafters. Inside were old tax receipts, yellowed photographs, and a folded map so brittle I had to spread it across the hood of my truck with both hands. It was dated 1974. The ink had faded to a weak brown, but one label still stood out clear as a warning sign. Independent Residential Parcel Group. It covered the entire lower end of Hawthorne Lane, every small house from the bend to the cul-de-sac, plus the gravel access road, the drainage strip, and the narrow green belt behind the lots. I remember standing there with dust on my sleeves and sunlight cutting through the garage window, feeling the first small click of something bigger locking into place. Willow Creek Estates had been built years after that map. The Homeowners Association had wrapped itself around the newer subdivision like ivy, but Hawthorne Lane was older. Separate. Original. I did not know everything yet, but I knew enough to start digging. County records became my evening routine. Coffee went cold beside my laptop while I matched parcel numbers, old deeds, tax maps, and easement notes. By midnight, the house would go quiet except for the buzz of the porch light and the soft scratch of paper sliding under my fingers. Each document told the same story in a different voice. The board had been pretending for years that the dead end belonged to them, and nobody had bothered to check the bones. Marjorie Whitcomb introduced herself on a Tuesday afternoon with the confidence of a woman who had never been told no in a room where it mattered. I was on a ladder replacing a cracked fascia board when her white Lexus rolled to the curb so slowly it looked ceremonial. The tires barely touched the edge of my gravel drive, but she still looked down at it like dirt had personally offended her. She stepped out wearing cream slacks, gold earrings, and a smile polished so hard it had no warmth left in it. The air smelled like sawdust and primer, with a faint sting of rain coming in from the west, but her perfume arrived first, sharp and sweet, like expensive flowers left too long in a hot car. She did not say hello. She looked at my truck, then the paint cans, then the stack of cedar boards, and said, "We are going to need to discuss your compliance issues." I climbed down slowly, because rushing gives people like that the satisfaction of thinking they startled you. Compliance with what? I asked. Her smile did not move. Willow Creek Community Standards. She opened a white folder and pulled out a sheet already marked with yellow tabs. That was the first thing I noticed. She had not come to inspect. She had come with a verdict. Exterior color must be approved by the Architectural Committee. Work vehicles cannot remain visible overnight. Construction materials must be screened from street view. Temporary signage is prohibited, and your porch light is not an approved fixture. She said all of it in one smooth breath, as if she had practiced in the mirror. I looked up at the old brass porch light, the same one that had probably hung there since the 70s, its glass cloudy and its screws rusted in place. "That light is older than your association," I said. Her eyes narrowed for half a second. It was quick, but I saw it. The crack in the porcelain. "Mr. Caldwell, I understand you are new here, so I am trying to be generous. This neighborhood has a reputation. People move here for order, predictability, standards." She glanced at my work boots when she said standards. Not at the house, not at the cracked boards, at my boots. That told me everything. To Marjorie, I was not a homeowner fixing a neglected property. I was a problem that had parked a contractor truck where a spotless sedan should have been. Behind her, two board members stood near the curb pretending to examine my mailbox. One of them took pictures with a phone. The little shutter sound clicked through the afternoon air like a tiny gavel. "You will receive formal notices by mail," Marjorie continued. "The board prefers cooperation, but we are authorized to escalate." There it was. The word people use when they want power without saying threat. Escalate. I wiped my hands on my jeans and asked, "Can you show me the covenant that puts this property under Willow Creek?" Her face went still, not confused, annoyed, like I had asked a waiter to prove the restaurant on the plate. "Everyone on this street follows the same rules." That was not my question. For the first time, the smile disappeared. The clouds shifted, and the whole street dimmed around us. She slid the paper back into her folder with a crisp snap. "You may want to be careful, Mr. Caldwell. Defiance becomes expensive very quickly around here. Then she turned, heels ticking against the pavement, and climbed back into her Lexus. As she drove away, I watched her pause at the bend where Hawthorne Lane met the newer subdivision. She looked at the street sign, then at the old houses behind me, like she was counting territory. What she did not know was that I had already counted it too. The first notice arrived 2 days later, folded inside a cream envelope, so heavy it felt like an invitation to a wedding nobody wanted to attend. The paper smelled like fresh toner and expensive office supplies. Across the top, in bold red letters, it said First Compliance Warning, as if my porch light had committed some grand offense against civilization. I stood at my kitchen counter with coffee going cold beside me and read every line twice. Exterior color violation. Commercial vehicle visibility. Unapproved improvement activity. Improper storage of materials. Temporary construction debris visible from the street. The funny part was that every item they listed was either protected by city renovation permits or sitting on private property outside their reach. The not-so-funny part was the fine schedule attached to the back. $50 per day for the paint. $75 per day for the truck. $100 per day for continued non-compliance after board review. They had built a money machine out of printer paper. By the end of the week, there were 4 more envelopes in my mailbox, each one more aggressive than the last. The mailbox flag squeaked every morning when I lifted it, and I started to hate that sound. It meant Marjorie had been busy. She cited my security camera as an architectural nuisance, my temporary porch railing as a safety hazard, my trash bins for being visible from the roadway during daylight hours, and the blue tarp over my lumber stack for failing to match approved earth tones. Earth tones. I remember standing in my driveway, staring at a tarp that had kept $300 of cedar dry through 2 nights of rain, thinking these people had confused taste with law. I did what I always did when something smelled wrong. I documented everything. I photographed the envelopes before opening them. I scanned every page. I saved certified mail receipts in a blue plastic file box that clicked shut like a vault. I pulled my city permits and taped copies inside the front window where anyone could see them. That only made Marjorie angrier. On Saturday morning, I found her newest move planted beside my driveway. A red and white sign on a metal stake, hammered into the gravel shoulder like she was claiming a frontier. Homeowners Association violation property. Board review pending. The letters were big enough for passing cars to slow down. A minivan crawled by while I stood there in my work shirt, and I saw a teenager in the back seat point at my house. The heat rose behind my eyes, but I kept my hands still. That was her game. Public shame first. Legal confusion second. Pressure until the target folded. I took 1 photograph from the road, 1 from my porch, and 1 close enough to show the stake piercing my gravel, not city right-of-way, not community land, my deeded frontage. Then I pulled it out of the ground with 1 hand. The metal made a dry scraping sound as it came loose. I placed it flat across my sawhorses, wrote the date and time on a piece of painter tape, and added it to the blue file box. 20 minutes later, Marjorie's Lexus glided around the bend. She stopped at the curb, lowered her window, and looked at the empty spot where her sign had been. Her face did not change much, but her knuckles tightened around the steering wheel. "You just made this a legal matter," she said. I looked at the old houses behind me, all quiet under the noon sun, and said, "Good. Then let us keep it legal." By Monday evening, Marjorie had turned my driveway into a neighborhood attraction. She called it a community compliance walk, which sounded harmless until I saw 12 people gathered at the bend with clipboards, phones, and the kind of eager faces people get when somebody else is about to be embarrassed. The sun was dropping behind the roofs, throwing long orange stripes across Hawthorne Lane. Sprinklers hissed in the newer subdivision behind them, and the wet smell of cut grass drifted over the dry dust of my gravel road. I was tightening the temporary handrail on my porch when they came marching toward me like a parade of bad decisions. Marjorie led the group in white sneakers that had never seen mud, her board members behind her, and Greg Whitcomb walking at her side with his city council lapel pin shining in the low light. That little pin was supposed to do half the talking before he opened his mouth. I could hear one of the board members narrating into a phone, her voice bright and fake. "We are documenting ongoing refusal to maintain community standards." The word documenting almost made me smile. People like Marjorie never understand that a camera records both directions. My porch camera was already running. So was the small one under the garage eave. So was the dashboard camera in my truck, parked at a perfect angle with the engine off and the lens catching the whole street. I wiped my hands on a rag and stepped down to the driveway. "Evening," I said. Nobody answered except Linda Price, the elderly woman from 2 houses up, who gave me a tiny nod from the edge of the crowd. Linda had lived on Hawthorne Lane since the 1980s, back when the road had no decorative entrance, no board meetings, and no one measuring shrubs like national security depended on it. Her husband had passed years ago, and Marjorie had been pressuring her to sign a voluntary association agreement ever since. Linda looked scared, but she looked tired of being scared. Marjorie stopped 10 feet from me and lifted her clipboard. "Mr. Caldwell, this is an official board observation. On my property," I asked. "Within the Willow Creek community," she said, loud enough for the phones. There it was again. A broad claim. A clean lie. Greg cleared his throat. "The city prefers cooperation in these matters. It prevents escalation." That word again, dressed up in a nicer suit. I looked at his pin, then at his polished shoes standing on my gravel frontage. "Is the city here tonight, Greg, or are you here as Marjorie's husband?" His jaw tightened. A few people shifted their weight. Marjorie jumped in before he could answer. "This entire block has always functioned under Willow Creek standards. Your refusal puts every homeowner at risk." I folded my rag slowly. "At risk of what?" She glanced toward the phone camera, then gave the performance everything she had. "Decreased values, unsafe renovations, unauthorized access, unapproved occupancy. If Mr. Caldwell continues to reject board authority, we will pursue liens, removal of improvements, and law enforcement support if necessary." The air felt thin and electric. Not because I was afraid, because she had just handed me the cleanest statement of intent I could have asked for. Behind her, Linda's face changed. She knew those words. She had heard them before, probably in letters, phone calls, and whispered warnings over her kitchen table. I did not argue. I did not tell them. They were wrong. I let the silence stretch until even the sprinklers sounded loud. Then I looked at every board member, every phone, every witness, and said, "Please make sure you save that recording." Marjorie smiled like she had won. She had no idea she had just signed the first page of her own undoing. That night, after the compliance walks scattered back into their perfect driveways and porch lights, I sat alone in my unfinished kitchen with the blue file box open on the table. The room smelled like sawdust, old wallpaper glue, and black coffee that had been sitting too long on the burner. Outside, Hawthorne Lane was quiet again, but it was not peaceful. Not anymore. Marjorie had done what people like her always do when they think shame is a weapon. She had brought witnesses. She had brought cameras. She had brought her husband and his little city council pin. But she had also brought something better than all of that. She had brought words. Clear words. Recorded words. The kind that sit on a timeline and wait for a judge to read them slowly. I slid a new label onto the file tab. Board claim of authority over entire block. Then I placed the recording transcript behind it and snapped the box shut. That sound, plastic locking against plastic, felt cleaner than anger. Here is the part Marjorie never saw coming. I did not buy that old house because it was my dream home. I bought it because it was the last square on a board I had been studying for 18 months. It started with Linda Price, though she did not know it at first. The week after I found that old 1974 map, I knocked on her door with a copy folded under my arm. Her house smelled like lemon cleaner and cinnamon tea, and the walls were lined with photographs of Hawthorne Lane before Willow Creek swallowed everything around it. There were kids on bicycles, old pickups and gravel drives, mailboxes that did not match, and people smiling like nobody had invented violation notices yet. Linda held the map in both hands for a long time. Her fingers trembled at the corners. "My husband told them this for years," she whispered. "They said he was confused." That was when I learned the real story. One by one, the older owners on Hawthorne Lane had been pressured. Not loudly, not all at once. A letter here, a fine there, a warning about market value, a suggestion that joining Willow Creek would be easier than fighting. Some sold cheap just to escape the stress. Some passed away and their children did not want the headache. Some signed papers they barely understood because Marjorie made resistance feel expensive. I had spent my life fixing neglected houses, but that was the first time I understood a whole street could be neglected too. So I started making calls. Quiet calls. Respectful calls. I found owners through county records, estate filings, tax notices, and old forwarding addresses. I did not lowball them. I did not scare them. I told them exactly what I had found, exactly what the property was worth, and exactly what I planned to do. Some cried with relief. One man in Arizona laughed for almost a full minute and said his father would have loved this. A widow in Tennessee mailed me her late husband's survey notes with a sticky note that said, "Make them tell the truth." Piece by piece, deed by deed, the block came together under Hawthorne Restoration Holdings, a small limited liability company with a boring name and very sharp paperwork. The gravel access road, the drainage strip, the greenbelt, the empty bungalow with the cracked chimney, Linda's old easement rights, preserved in writing. Every closing added another page to the blue file box. Every page made Marjorie's imaginary kingdom smaller. By the time she stood in my driveway calling me defiant, she was not looking at a lone homeowner. She was looking at the owner of the entire end of Hawthorne Lane, and she still thought the clipboard was bigger than the deed. Marjorie waited 48 hours before making the mistake that turned her paperwork theater into an official record. It happened just after sunrise on Thursday, the kind of clean American morning real estate brochures love to fake. The air was cool, the lawn still silver with dew, and the smell of damp mulch drifted from the Willow Creek entrance beds where their landscapers had planted rows of identical red begonias. I had been up since 5, replacing a warped threshold on the bungalow next door, when I heard the slow roll of tires at the bend. Not one car. 3. Marjorie's white Lexus came first, followed by Greg's black sedan and a Willow Creek maintenance truck with magnetic signs slapped crooked on both doors. A worker climbed out carrying a post-hole digger. Another unloaded a tall aluminum sign from the truck bed. The sign read Willow Creek Managed Access. Authorized residents only. I stood there with a pry bar in one hand and watched them carry it toward the gravel road I owned. The metal edges flashed in the early light. Marjorie saw me and lifted her chin like a queen approaching a peasant fence line. "This access point is being corrected today," she said. "Corrected by whom?" "By the board." "On whose land?" Her smile sharpened. "On community land." There was that phrase again, soft enough to sound reasonable, broad enough to steal a street. I set the pry bar on the porch rail and took out my phone. The tiny beep of the camera starting sounded almost polite. Greg stepped forward, voice low, council pin already glowing on his jacket. "Ethan, do not make this harder than it needs to be. The city has an interest in orderly neighborhood access. Then the city can send me something in writing." The worker hesitated with the post-hole digger halfway raised. He looked from me to Marjorie, then back to the gravel. Good. At least one person on that crew understood that digging on property without permission was not maintenance. It was evidence. Marjorie's face tightened. "Remove him," she told Greg, as if I were a broken lawn chair. Greg pulled out his phone and made the call. 10 minutes later, the first cruiser turned onto Hawthorne Lane, tires crunching over gravel that his department had no idea was about to become the center of the whole mess. Officer Daniel Reeves stepped out again, same tired eyes, same careful walk. His partner stayed near the cruiser, watching the maintenance truck, the sign, the phones, all of it. "Mr. Caldwell," Reeves said, recognizing me immediately. "What is going on this time?" Before I could answer, Marjorie rushed in with her clipboard raised. "He is interfering with Authorized Homeowners Association access control. He removed our prior sign. He has continued illegal construction, and now he is blocking installation of board-approved safety signage." Reeves looked at the aluminum sign resting against the truck. "Where were you installing it?" "At the Hawthorne access point," she said. "This entrance belongs to Willow Creek." The body camera on Reeves's chest blinked red. I saw it. Marjorie did not. Or maybe she saw it and trusted herself too much. That little red light was worth more than every argument I could have made. Reeves turned to me. "Sir, are you preventing them from working?" "Yes," I said calmly. "Because they are attempting to install a permanent sign on private property without authorization." Marjorie laughed once, dry and bright. "He keeps saying private property as if saying it enough times makes it true." I almost thanked her. Instead, I reached into the truck and pulled out the blue file box. The plastic handle creaked under the weight of 18 months of patience. Every head turned toward it. The maintenance worker lowered the post-hole digger completely. The morning seemed to narrow around that sound, metal touching gravel. Reeves glanced at the box, then at me. Do you have documentation? I set the box on my tailgate and rested one hand on the lid. Not open yet. Not until she finished burying herself. I do, I said. But before I show you, I want her to confirm something on camera. Marjorie folded her arms. Confirm what? I looked straight at Officer Reeves's body camera, then back at her. That the Willow Creek Board is claiming legal authority over this road, this frontage, and the entire lower end of Hawthorne Lane. She did not hesitate. Yes, she said. We are. The click of the blue file box opening sounded like a lock turning in the other direction. I lifted the lid of the blue file box, and the whole mood on Hawthorne Lane changed. Up to that second, Marjorie had been performing for the officers, the board, and the maintenance crew like the ending had already been written in her favor. Then she saw the binders. Not loose papers. Not some confused homeowner folder. Stuffed with receipts. Binders. Tabs. Certified copies. County stamps. A surveyor seal pressed so hard into the paper, you could feel the raised circle under your thumb. Officer Reeves stepped closer, and I handed him the first document in a clear sleeve. This is the warranty deed for the house behind me, I said. Recorded 8 months ago. He looked it over and nodded. Marjorie made a soft, impatient sound. Nobody is disputing he bought that house. Good, I said. Then we can move faster. I handed Reeves the next deed. This is the bungalow next door. Recorded 11 months ago. Then the next. The gray ranch with the cracked chimney. 14 months ago. Then another. The vacant duplex at the bend. 16 months ago. The sound of each plastic sleeve sliding out of the binder was quiet, but it landed harder than shouting. Marjorie's smile faded 1 inch at a time. Greg stopped looking at me and started looking at the documents. That was the first honest thing his face had done all morning. Reeves flipped through the pages slowly. These are all under Hawthorne Restoration Holdings? Yes, sir. My company. I pulled out the old 1974 map and unfolded it across the tailgate. The paper crackled in the cool air. The faded lines of Hawthorne Lane stretched beneath our hands like the skeleton of the whole neighborhood. I placed a newer county parcel map beside it, then a current survey completed 3 weeks earlier. 3 maps. Same boundary. Same road. Same lower block. This section was never annexed into Willow Creek Estates, I said. The Homeowners Association covenant starts at the north side of the bend. Hawthorne Lane below that line is a separate parcel group with private access, private drainage, and no recorded obligation to their board. Reeves traced the line with one finger. And the road. I slid the final survey toward him. Private frontage and access easement controlled by my company. Their sign would have been installed on my land. The maintenance worker took 2 steps back from the post hole digger like it had become radioactive. Marjorie finally found her voice, but it came out thinner than before. That is not possible. We have maintained this area for years. I opened another tab. No, you build people for maintaining it. That is different. Linda Price had come out onto her porch by then, one hand pressed to her chest, watching the papers she had waited years to see. I handed Reeves the voluntary association letters Marjorie had sent older residents, the fine notices, the fee demands, and the lien threats mailed to properties outside the covenant boundary. The morning wind lifted one corner of the old map, and I held it down with my palm. Officer, I am requesting that they leave my property and remove their equipment. Reeves looked at Marjorie, not with anger. Worse, with official clarity. Ma'am, based on what I am seeing, you do not have authority to install anything here today. Greg stepped in fast. Officer, this is a complex municipal issue. Reeves did not blink. Then you can resolve it without digging holes on someone else's property. The red light on his body camera kept blinking. Marjorie stared at it like she had just noticed the room had witnesses she could not charm. For the first time since I met her, she had no clipboard answer. Only silence. The maintenance truck left first, backing away so slowly its reverse alarm sounded embarrassed. Marjorie stood on the gravel with her clipboard hanging at her side, no longer a badge, just paper. Officer Reeves gave her one more chance to take the clean exit. Ma'am, I am advising you to leave the property and handle this through proper civil channels. She heard the words, but pride is a loud engine. This is not over, she said. Her voice had lost the sugar. All that remained was vinegar. I nodded toward the sign, still leaning against the truck. Take that with you. Greg stepped close to her and whispered something, but his eyes kept sliding toward the blue file box. He understood before she did. The road was the small problem. The billing records were the big one. By noon, I had emailed copies of everything to the county recorder, the state real estate commission, and the attorney Linda had helped me find, a sharp woman named Rebecca Sloan who sounded calm enough to make bad men nervous. By 4 o'clock, Rebecca called me back. I was standing in the old duplex, pulling painter tape from a window frame, when my phone buzzed on a stack of drop cloths. The room smelled like latex paint and warm dust. "Ethan," she said, "how long has Willow Creek been collecting fees from those lower parcels?" "At least 7 years," I said. "Maybe more." There was a pause, just long enough for the truth to settle. "Then this is not a boundary dispute. This is a pattern." That word changed everything. Pattern. Not mistake. Not misunderstanding. Pattern. Over the next week, the street went quiet in that strange way a neighborhood goes quiet when everyone knows something is happening, but nobody wants to say it first. Marjorie stopped driving past my house. Greg stopped wearing his council pin at local events. The board removed their online post about my so-called violations without explanation, but the screenshots were already printed, dated, and sleeping in my file box. Then Linda started bringing me envelopes. Old envelopes. Cream paper. Red stamps. Final demands. She had saved every one in a shoebox under her guest bed. Other former owners sent what they had too. Canceled checks. Certified letters. Copies of voluntary agreements that were not voluntary at all. One man had paid $9,000 in maintenance assessments on a home that had never belonged to the association. A retired schoolteacher had sold her bungalow $20,000 under value after Marjorie threatened years of fines she had no authority to issue. Each document was another nail, clean and straight, driven by their own handwriting. The county opened a formal review by the end of the month. Then came the audit. There is a sound a printer makes when it is spitting out trouble, fast and relentless, page after page landing in the tray like rain on a tin roof. Rebecca let me sit in her office while she highlighted the findings. Willow Creek had collected more than $180,000 in unauthorized fees from properties outside its recorded boundary. Some payments had gone into a maintenance account. Some had been transferred into what the board called community enhancement. That sounded pretty until the invoices showed landscaping at Marjorie's entrance beds, decorative lighting near Greg's side street, and consultant payments to a company registered to one of the board members' relatives. The lie had not just been standing on my gravel. It had been eating from the neighborhood checking account for years. When the board meeting notice went out, people packed the clubhouse until the room smelled like coffee, perfume, and panic. Marjorie sat at the front table, pale under the fluorescent lights, while Rebecca placed the old 1974 map beside the audit report. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody needed to. The documents did all the talking. The clubhouse had never been that quiet with so many people inside it. Folding chairs scraped against the linoleum, coffee steamed in paper cups, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like they were tired of listening to lies. Marjorie sat at the front table with both hands wrapped around her pen, but she was not writing anymore. Greg kept staring at the audit report as if the numbers might rearrange themselves out of mercy. Rebecca Sloan did not raise her voice once. She did not have to. She walked the room through the boundary map, the recorded covenants, the unauthorized fee notices, the checks, the transfers, and the board minutes where Marjorie had referred to Hawthorne Lane as a compliance opportunity. That phrase landed hard. People who had been afraid of her for years finally heard what they had been to the board. Not neighbors. Not homeowners. Opportunities. Linda Price sat in the second row with her purse in her lap, and her chin lifted higher than I had ever seen it. When Rebecca placed Linda's old letters on the table, Marjorie looked away. That was the closest thing to an apology anyone got from her. The county investigator spoke next, calm and flat, the way government people sound when the paperwork is already stronger than the excuse. Willow Creek would be required to refund improperly collected fees, submit to financial oversight, and halt all enforcement activity outside its recorded boundary. The board president and treasurer would be removed pending review. Greg was asked to recuse himself from any city matter involving the association. No shouting, no dramatic collapse, just signatures, notices, and the slow sound of power being unplugged. 3 weeks later, the refunds started going out. Linda cried when hers arrived. not because of the money, but because the memo line said unauthorized assessment reimbursement. For the first time, the truth had a letterhead. The class action followed. The state commission opened its own file. Marjorie sold her white Lexus before Christmas, and Greg stopped appearing in neighborhood newsletters with that polished smile of his. The board replaced the entrance signs, removed every false claim about Hawthorne Lane, and sent one stiff little apology that sounded like it had been dragged across a lawyer's desk by the collar. I kept working on the houses. That was the part nobody expected. I did not buy the block to build a wall around it and gloat. I bought it to put the bones back where they belonged. The cracked duplex got new windows. The gray ranch got its chimney rebuilt. Linda kept her garden exactly how she liked it. Wild lavender, uneven stones, and a blue birdbath Marjorie had once called visually inconsistent. In spring, I installed the gate at the bend. Not some giant fortress gate. Just a clean black steel arm with a keypad, a camera, and a sign that read Hawthorne Block, private road, access by written permission only. Every resident who had a lawful easement got a code. Delivery drivers got a schedule. Emergency services got full access. Everything permitted. Everything recorded. Everything done the way Marjorie had pretended to care about. The first morning the gate closed in front of her was almost too quiet. Her new sedan rolled to a stop at the bend, and for a second I could see her through the windshield, sunglasses on, mouth tight, staring at the sign. The motor hummed softly. The arm stayed down. She looked toward my porch, where I stood with a mug of coffee and primer still on my sleeve. I did not wave. I did not smile. I just watched the woman who once tried to have me removed from my own property put her car in reverse and take the long way around. The gravel under my boots felt steady that morning. The cedar fence smelled clean in the sun, and the old 1974 map, framed now inside my hallway, hung straight on the wall like it had been waiting 50 years to breathe again. Marjorie thought authority came from clipboards, titles, and loud threats in front of a crowd. She learned what my mother taught me, what every good contractor already knows, and what every bully forgets. The strongest thing in any structure is what holds up under pressure. Justice does not have to shout. Sometimes it just waits, gathers every receipt, records every lie, and signs the deed.